The Xtalks Life Science Podcast is your source for all things pharma, biotech, medtech, healthcare, research, and more.
Hello and welcome to the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. I'm Ayesha Rashid, Senior Life Science Journalist at Xtalks.com, and this week I am delighted to introduce a very special guest on our show. As always, so great to have so many amazing leaders in the field, and we have yet another one with us today. So with us we have Dr. Joseph Sinkule, who is the CEO, founder, and chairman of the board of directors at Klotho Neurosciences, which is a biogenetics company developing cell and gene therapies using a patented secreted form of the anti-aging human Klotho gene for the treatment of neurodegenerative age-related disorders like Alzheimer's, ALS, Parkinson's, and others. Dr. Sinkule has over 40 years of drug, biologic, and medical device R&D and commercialization experience. He has managed over 8 drug and biotech products successfully through FDA approval to market, 5 medical devices, and 8 in vitro diagnostics. He has led teams of all sizes, managed CROs and CDMOs, serves on 2 company boards, and regularly advises venture capital firms, investment banks, and pharmaceutical and biotech companies at all stages. So to learn more about the work that Dr. Sinkule is leading at Klotho Neurosciences, let's turn to him now. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
My pleasure.
So happy to have you. And again, such an illustrious career in the field. I'm so excited to learn more about it. But first, I'd like to learn a bit more about Klotho Neurosciences and really what the company's core missions and goals are.
Okay. Well, we're focused on the development of disease-modifying cell and gene therapies. Not small molecule drugs, not biologic proteins, but cell and gene therapy. And we're using our patented secreted form of the human anti-aging Klotho gene to transform the treatment of neurodegenerative and age-related disorders, such as you mentioned, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and other neurodegenerative diseases.
Awesome. And I really like the name Klotho Neurosciences. I mean, there's so many, thousands and millions of genes, and to actually have a company dedicated to a gene, because you're dedicated to this gene. And I'm so curious to know about really the importance of this gene, which obviously it seems to be very central in, of course, the work that you're leading. So could you tell us a bit more about Klotho and why it's inspired the company?
Will do. So Klotho was named after one of the daughters of Zeus in Greek mythology. That's spelled Klotho. And Klotho spins the thread of life. The concept of and the inventor, the discoverer of the gene, Kuro named it because he did the key experiments discovering the gene, where he knocked it out, he excised the gene from a mouse genome, and these animals were born normally but died within 2 weeks of age, pathologic aging, basically their cardiovascular system, hardening of the arteries, renal failure, loss of memory and cognition. And basically, when he and his colleagues amplified the gene, the expression of the protein, much higher levels, these animals actually grew and aged 20 to 30% longer than the normal healthy mice that typically die within a year and a half or 2 years of birth. So that 20% increase, and they lived a healthy long life, not with the disease. So rather than the longevity gene, he named it the anti-aging gene. This was so I got really sucked into the literature. There were now 4,000 publications on this gene and protein since its discovery in 1997. And I got sucked into a couple of review articles, which led to another 100, 200 articles that I've read on the protein. Ultimately, I founded the company, took it public in 2025, hired a small but highly experienced management team to work with me. We raised the money to develop and commercialize therapeutics, as well as a diagnostic related to the human Klotho gene and its two protein isoforms. So all of our cells in our body contain this gene, just like insulin. Insulin is only made primarily in the beta cells of the pancreas. This protein is primarily made in the brain as well as in the kidneys. So one of the two isoforms controls phosphate and calcium homeostasis in the body, but the secreted form, which we have patented, is made primarily in the brain, in the hippocampus and choroid plexus of the brain. So it controls, as the cerebral spinal fluid is bathed in this protein, it really helps with cognition, memory, all different types of neurologic functions in the central nervous system.
Fantastic. And really, we hear about the fountain of youth, and it's, again, like you said, a lot of diseases are, whether neurological, cardio, and, in the heart, cardiac space, and cancer, so many are age related. And I think people a lot of times may overlook that aspect in terms of the health and disease over just, looking young forever and things of that sort. So very fascinating. And the fact that it was only discovered in 1997, which is not too long ago at all. So very, very exciting. And in terms of disease areas and indications, I did mention, and you mentioned that you are looking at diseases like ALS and Alzheimer's. And so what really do you see the potential for targeting this gene in these particular diseases, given their pathophysiology?
Yeah, so we really have a focus on two different constructs, as they call it in the world of gene therapy. We're using adeno-associated viral vectors to deliver to certain organs, certain tissues in our body. So we have two product candidates. One delivers the Klotho gene to the brain, so it's a central nervous system related brain and spinal cord, and one that delivers and the gene is expressed into this protein transcript at the neuromuscular junction in muscle tissues. So the therapeutic focus is on brain-related pathologies like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Huntington's disease, and so on, and neuromuscular diseases with the second construct being targeted to muscle. So ALS, muscular pathologies like multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, and so on. And so we plan to have two INDs filed for these two different medical products, if you will, in late this year or early next year for those two product candidates.
Fantastic. And also the field of gene therapy has come such a long way, just from proof of concept to actualization in terms of translating it into medicines, which is we've been seeing a lot more in the past several years, which is so fantastic. And do you envision, would this be sort of an ongoing treatment, or as with many gene therapies, is it going to be the idea potentially curative? And I say that, with all the caveats that come with that term cure, but would it be like a one-time administration or a couple of times over someone's lifetime, or are these therapies designed?
Yeah, we anticipate, because of gene therapies, you're basically creating a viral delivery system that gets the gene inside the cells that it infects. And there in the cytoplasm of the cell, it doesn't mess with nuclear DNA. It basically produces the protein out of the cytoplasm. So it is then exits the cell and distributes among the tissues of the body and goes systemic just based on that single dose. And that single dose lasts a long time. So that's an advantage of cell and gene therapy is you can give the gene and it can produce the protein for very long periods of time rather than having to come into the clinic for your weekly hemophilia recombinant protein infusion. This bypasses the need for that altogether.
Absolutely. And in terms of, I want to kind of step back and ask you more about your background. And you've been in biotech in the biopharma space for over 4 decades. And so that must be so fascinating to reflect on how things have evolved over, all of these years. And so what are sort of the biggest things that you've seen that have really sort of paved the way to where we are today? That's one component. And then I'll ask the second part of the question in terms of what it takes to lead a biotech today and all of those leadership capabilities and skill sets, of course. So first, I'd like to, just ask you about the field and how you've seen it evolve.
Yeah, from the beginning of let's say post-World War II era, the drugs that were available were synthetic molecules made by synthetic procedures with the starting molecule that you build upon over time and intravenously or orally administered. You have to have the bioavailability, the distribution of that small molecule over time. In the late 1970s and the early 80s became the recombinant DNA revolution, where the proteins that man needed were actually made in a bioreactor or a fermentation vessel, whether it be insulin or a variety of recombinant proteins, were made, by companies in a manufacturing facility, which were then bottled, put in vials, and ultimately made it to the patient as a recombinant protein product. Now, what we're asking of cell therapy, where we can introduce a gene into a cell and then give that cell to a person, that cell will circulate. It may target certain tissues. It may go from a primordial cell to a differentiated cell type and stay in that tissue and make the protein that was introduced by that gene into that cell. Or we can give things like adeno-associated virus or lipid nanoparticles to deliver the gene, where again, it gets inside the cell. The engineering of the cell allows it to make the protein in quantities that are therapeutic over long periods of time. So, gene therapy, in my opinion, and cell therapy is really at the beginning of another revolution that will basically be the way we give medicines, biologics, and genes in the future. So it's a future of medicine.
And in terms of leading companies, founding and creating companies in biotech and biopharma, what does it take today as compared to a couple of decades ago? And how have your experiences at different companies shaped your leadership and drug development strategies and approaches? Sure.
Well, I've been doing drug development now in academia for 8 years, and then in industry for the remaining 42 years. So 46 years of experience. My clinical and regulatory background and decades of experience, I think, has been a key to successful outcomes of what I've been trying to do therapeutically, and even on the diagnostic side over the years. And I've seen good leadership take not so good products, through commercialization, successful commercialization. And I've seen what should have been or could have been really good products fail because of poor leadership or poor guidance from consultants on the sideline who had nothing to lose. So, my hands-on drug development experience, hands-on, and my constant research for examples of success and failed drug development programs and understand why they have been successful or why they had failed, that has helped me a lot. in guiding, as a consultant and as an employee of my own companies, has guided me a lot.
I can imagine. And I think that's so interesting how you said good leadership can take so-so bad products and forward, and bad leadership can destroy a good product. So that's a really, really good point. And then talking about current challenges and the flip side of that, opportunities in drug development, particularly in cell and gene therapy, of course. What are those today? We've come a long way drastically, but there still are quite a lot of challenges. And what do you see those being, and what opportunities do you see in addressing those and tackling them?
Yeah, for sure. And as I said before, I really believe cell and gene therapies are the future of medicine. And, instead of making molecules and proteins outside the body, as has been done since the beginning of pharmaceutical development and biotech development, why not make them inside the body by introducing genes and cells modified to carry the genes, making the proteins. So it saves several steps and a lot of time, in the way of making those therapeutic proteins. Some of the three major challenges in doing this, and it remains a challenge, particularly in the world of biotechnology, is the challenge of raising money. And it remains today. It's very difficult to raise money for drug development, particularly biotechnology in general, over the last several years. There are a lot of opportunities, sadly, because the funding has dried up, and even startup companies that run out of that initial tranche of money or a couple of tranches of money, they're looking. They have to either sell off their assets or partner, would be willing to partner with a company who has enough finances to invest their time and money in commercializing those assets. I hope that turns around in the future, but in the foreseeable near future, I don't see a lot of change in that challenge. But we're looking at other opportunities as well that fit into either the central nervous system therapeutic area, and as I'll kind of throw out there, since this is the anti-aging gene, we are also looking at longevity, healthy lifespan, and how one might be able to develop those types of products as well. So those are just a few challenges: money, and because of the lack of money, there are opportunities that one could pick up that have been have had the research done and need drug development.
Yeah, so unfortunate. I think we've been hearing that for far too long now. Biotech is, underfunded. There's the money issues, raising money, which is, it's really, really unfortunate. And like you said, hope things do turn around, because I think I've been hearing that almost seems like what's forever now. So.
For sure.
And you mentioned that, of course, as an anti-aging gene, that you're taking a look at this, of course, in just general longevity and well-being. And do you have any plans, or what other indications, disease-wise, do you think your approach could be applied in?
Yeah, I mean, it's the clinical trials. Proof of concept in mice, I mean, anyone can do that, and everyone is doing that, but to actually develop a product and being able to pay for the steps along the way and the team of people that you rely on along the way, it's much more complicated. I worked in oncology for the first 30 years of my career. Unlike oncology, where the endpoints are mainly related to how long someone survives, the clinical trials of agents looking at neurodegenerative diseases are actually quite subjective. A diary, a PET scan, or whatever, relying on biomarkers for earlier approval It usually takes a long time before we know if these drugs targeting neuroscience indications, whether they work or they don't work. So, and it's difficult, unlike oncology where you have a mass, you remove it, hopefully it hasn't spread. It's difficult to repair neurologic damage that has occurred, prior to a definitive diagnosis. And many times it takes a long time of pain or lack of memory or whatever until you get a definitive diagnosis. So like cancer, the sooner you get it diagnosed and a physician starts planning your future, the better the outcome. So early diagnosis in neurodegenerative diseases is a big issue on its own. What we plan to do that's a little bit different, and I helped to kind of pioneer this years ago, is to do what they call adaptive design studies. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Okay. So we can run randomized, use patients right away, randomized phase 1-2 studies looking at pharmacokinetics, safety, dose escalation, and then you basically roll into phase 2, having identified a safe and effective dose in phase 1. Now you're phase 2 stage. And at the end of phase 2, based on maybe a biomarker or some other endpoint, you stop, you have a DSMB, a data safety monitoring board, look at the data that's been blinded and randomized. And then you go to FDA, and FDA would then approve you going on, continuing the protocol as a phase 3 stage protocol, a pivotal clinical trial, and basically recalculate the number of subjects needed to get an adequately powered number of patients evaluated and followed. So this approach, again, we've used it in cancer. I'm trying to apply it to things like ALS, where there actually is within 2 to 3 years, patients typically die of that disease, or time to wheelchair, time from wheelchair to ventilator. There are things very similar to oncology that we can apply to devastating terminal diseases like ALS. So this approach, I think, will allow a more rapid timeline for approval. And we can then, of course, as a company, give a commitment to run a phase 4 protocol so that one can accrue larger number of patients after market approval. So that in a nutshell is our development plan for ALS specifically, but some of these other diseases that progress pretty rapidly to a fatal outcome.
Yeah, indeed. And that was going to be one of my next questions in terms of what the challenges are in designing clinical trials for neurodegenerative diseases like ALS and Alzheimer's. And so, yeah, that's fantastic. Also, in terms of, funding is one thing, and then we also talk about partnerships, collaborations. How important are those in today's drug development landscape? We're so interconnected. We don't and can't work in isolation. And especially smaller biotechs have, some of the greatest ideas, and then you have larger pharma wanting to come in, either collaborate, do M&As, or and things of that sort. So,
right.
And then you have patient advocacy groups, especially in diseases like ALS, which has kind of been like a poster child for that whole advocacy piece, as we saw with like the Ice Bucket Challenge and things like that. So, who are the stakeholders that need to be at the table, and how is Klotho fostering those kinds of collaborations, and how important are they?
Well, they're very important in many ways. You mentioned a couple with the big pharma collaboration that may want to get access to an asset, get access to an asset in a particular indication, may want to basically buy the company. Those are exits that we would look for in a big pharma scenario. And we will be looking for a partner for Alzheimer's and probably Parkinson's, because there's such large diseases, large numbers of patients, around the world with these diseases. And the big pharmas have the infrastructure to be able to run a 600 patient or 300 patient clinical trial pretty promptly. They have the machinery to do that. So we are also have begun to build bridges with the associations and the advocates, as you say, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, ALS, and so on. So that's a work in progress, if you will. And we're also, as I mentioned, we're taking this anti-aging gene, and we're planning to investigate our Klotho gene therapy in promoting healthy lifespan extension. So improved longevity and health span, I think, that will be difficult to prove to FDA on a biostatistical methodology and other regulatory authorities in a conventional FDA kind of clinical trial, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 approach. So we are working with groups now, with a few groups who are promoting innovative but logical ways to develop a drug and get label claims from FDA for a product that improves lifespan. Imagine if at middle age, 40 or 50 years, you get a dose of the Klotho gene therapy, and that extends your lifespan, by 20 to 30%, which we know it already does in mice, the 20 to 30% increase in normal healthy lifespan. That gives us as humans maybe a 16 to 20 year longer life than otherwise normal. And like I said, we can do this in mice. Why not humans? So that's another area that we're looking at relative to a couple collaborations with some ex-FDA people to try to get a legislation through the FDA that allows us to look at the diseases associated with aging, and if we have a drug that affects one or more of those pathologies, may get a life longevity product on the market through showing its activity in a variety of different diseases of aging, and that our product can help extend that lifespan. So those are things that we're looking at as well.
Yeah, that's that would be so cool, of course, and of course, with the extension of lifespan in a healthy manner, I would only imagine that the protective benefits against diseases of aging are going to be there. So that's going to definitely stir up a lot of excitement, and could definitely be just another approach, a very potent approach to addressing age-related diseases, indeed. And in terms of cell and gene therapies, what do you see as kind of the bottleneck today in getting over certain obstacles to really realize their full potential? So what are sort of the challenges in this space?
Now, good question. It's clearly, at this point, the bottleneck is in the ability to have these products made under good manufacturing practice regulations, GMP regulations. So, you can make DNA using E. coli and a fermenter, but then, those are small batches that you won't be able to do much with other than some experimental research at the lab bench. So what we're talking is about 2,000 liter or larger batches of DNA, and then the DNA has to be put into the viral vector or a vector to carry it wherever, because DNA on its own, if you inject it, it rapidly comes apart. So right now, those manufacturing steps are very expensive, take a year or longer for process development. How do you take it from raw materials coming in to exiting the building and ready to go be injected into patients? It's a long and very expensive process. So there are a lot of many what they call CDMOs, contract development and manufacturing organizations out there and more springing up to try to help with that challenge. But I think that, and then the regulatory review by the regulatory agencies are kind of bottlenecks. If you don't do things right, the FDA can hold you up and put you on clinical hold for very long periods of time till you fix the problem. So right now, that's the bottleneck. I mean, I think patients and patient advocates are very excited about this area of cell and gene therapy, but the access of having product available to do that clinical research, and then the regulatory boundaries that one has to jump over to get to that endpoint of starting clinical trial are kind of the bottlenecks.
Mm-hmm. Yep, indeed. And we have fantastic leaders and companies in the field addressing those bottlenecks, and hopefully getting over. We'll see that we'll soon overcome them and out of them for sure. And in terms of milestones, what milestones are you looking forward to at Klotho in this year? We're still in Q1 of this year, if we talk from a business perspective, but this year and in the next couple of years, what can we look forward to hearing and seeing coming out of Klotho?
So we're at the point of we have started the manufacture using a CDMO to make the two constructs I mentioned earlier, the one that traffics to the brain, crosses the blood-brain barrier into the brain, and the one that targets the neuromuscular junction. So at the point at which the brain and the peripheral nervous system is interacting with muscle. So those are the two constructs we have begun to manufacture. We will have material ready probably by the start of the fourth quarter of this year. Before we file the IND, we will have a pre-IND meeting with FDA to make sure that we have enough in our initial submission package to be able to get into clinical trials, these phase 1-2 studies. And I would say if there are additional toxicology they wish to see, the FDA might want to see completed, that may delay by 30 to 60 to 90 days the start of that trial. But I think that if we push hard enough, particularly with ALS, where there's nothing effective against that disease. Sorry about that. My cell phone's going up. Then we will we'll probably be for the ALS study in the clinic. I hope before the end of this year or the early start of next year.
Sounds fantastic and so exciting. We're definitely going to be keeping an eye out on all of those developments here at Xtalks. And Dr. Sinkule, I just want to thank you so much for all of the fantastic work that you have led for so long and continue to lead at Klotho now. So thank you so much for the work that you do. We wish you all the best. And thank you so much for your time with us today to share all of that work and all of your fantastic insights.
Well, thank you. I thank Xtalks for setting this up. And Dr. Rashid, thank you for your time as well.
Thank you so much. And we will definitely be looking out for all of those developments, as I mentioned, at Klotho.
Very good.
All right. So that's the end of this episode of the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. If you liked today's show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next week. Bye for now.